This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love. That you would take my place.
Good morning, ladies. I have only been coming to Burke since last summer, and you'll hear about that as I tell you a little bit about my story. But when I was given some of the same verses, and I think that's amazing how God works, because I didn't take the same things away that Kim took from looking at the same verses. But one of the verses that came to mind as I read through what they sent was 1 John 5:14 and 15. And he says, "This is the confidence we have in approaching God, that if we ask anything according to his will, he hears us. And if we know that he hears us, whatever we ask, we know that we have what we asked of him." And that is not to mean that God is a genie and you can just rub the lantern and ask what he wants, because it's important to read where it says in his will. So I just want to take a few minutes to talk to you about my life and the times when I've lived in asking for things in his will, and the times when, we're talking about being vulnerable. That hasn't always been the case. So when you hear the word foundation, your first thoughts might go to hard, secure items like bricks or timbers for houses, and that'd be a good first thought if you were building a house. But consider plants, like we just heard about, and the foundations they require for their tender little roots to take hold. Some need densely packed dirt, and others prefer that coarse dirt. And the huge redwoods that we admire from such a long distance, below they actually prefer deep, well-drained soil. And in my walk with Jesus, and I'm sure in yours, that I found no matter what type of foundation I need to encounter, the trials or valleys that life has thrown at me, having a relationship with a master gardener and a builder who knows me and knows how to place each cornerstone and prune, which hurts, each branch in my life, has made all the difference. So I was fortunate to grow up in a home with two loving parents who were very actively involved in our church. And I accepted Jesus at a very young age while meeting with a very kind older mentor of my mom's. And she lovingly explained the salvation story this way. At 5 years old, I still remember that tender sweetness she used, because she told me what it would be like to live my whole life with a friend like her friend Jesus. And at 5, I just wanted that. I wanted that kind of friendship. But as I grew up, I had to start to learn how to walk that relationship out on my own, and I began to know him more and more. And on my 14th birthday, I decided to dedicate my life and career to Jesus. And I felt two whispers from God. And some of you who may be newer to that might be thinking, how are all these women hearing voices and people don't think that's weird? Trust me, we wish it was a really big voice, but a lot of times it's that gentle prodding. It's that when you walk by thinking maybe I should stop and open the door for that person or talk to that person. And the more you respond and do that, the more you'll hear that. But just like any other friendship, you have to nurture that. So the two things that I kind of heard him tell me, one was that I was being called to become a missionary, and I didn't know what that looked like. And then in college, the call became stronger that it was to become a public school teacher. And what a mission field that is in public education. Nobody wants to talk about it, and you can wear your cross. And if you're any other religion, it's fine to talk about it, but not Christianity, and not in Northern Virginia. So God really has placed me in that mission field, and now it's the hard part of walking it out. So the prayers that you offer up for those of us in public education, they're appreciated. We support that because we are trying to be a light in that darkness. And the second whisper, I'll tell you that in a little bit. But during college, I was very active in my local church, and I worked as a summer youth intern and other various jobs with students. And that's when my story started to turn, because that's when I tried to tend my own garden and I tried to lay my own foundation. And that's usually when we get in trouble. So in college, the semester immediately after I was that summer youth intern, I had never felt closer to Jesus. And now I know that's when the enemy strikes the hardest. So ladies, get ready. He's coming after you tomorrow. And I've heard that unless you have a target on your back, you're not doing the right thing, right? The devil's not afraid of a Bible with dust on it. He knows the word better than most Christians do. So be ready, because that's when he comes. And I returned to start a job as a resident assistant in my dorm to help pay for school. And it was there I met the man who would become my future husband. He was not a believer. In fact, he resented that God had taken his father from him, not through death, but through a genuine conversion and relationship with Jesus. He felt his dad had changed, and he didn't like it. And I journaled during that time of my life, which I don't often do, and I can now see that I was trying to convince myself that this relationship was going to be a great way for me to witness to him. Later, somebody told me I was entering what you call a missionary marriage, one where you're going to save him. So later, after we married, we had 2 children. We moved around Virginia. Unlike many of you military wives, I've only lived in Virginia my entire 51 years. And my relationship with Jesus and membership at vibrant churches laid a very strong foundation for all my life and my decisions. My children were always at church with me. And through very unplanned but definitely God-controlled circumstances, both children ended up in Christian schools for kindergarten through 2nd grades. And God has always been with me during every valley, and he helped me to see the blessings that tragedy can also bring. Although sometimes when you're going through those, you don't feel like he's there. He's never left. It was through my own diagnosis of breast cancer that I met and still meet some of the bravest women, and I'm now able to support them with their trials. It was through a divorce that God led me to many new friends who could mentor my own children and to whom I could repay the favor. He was with me when I would fall asleep at night, not knowing where we would next live, which when you have predictability and you've always known, it's very hard. And he was with me as figuring out how I'd manage as a single working mom and how I could ever see the good that he could redeem from the many poor decisions I had made. He's been there as I've walked with him as a member and leader of various women's groups, and he even used me as a leader of my singles group during that phase of my life. I can share amazing stories of God's faithfulness. And women, if you've had that, you need to share that because the world doesn't hear enough of that and we don't tell enough other people about that. God doesn't call us to go on trial and be a lawyer to bring people to him. He calls us to be a witness. And so tell your story. The world wants to say, tell your truth. We're going to tell the absolute truth, which is the truth about Jesus. So I can share amazing stories of faithfulness as I relied on him as the foundation of my finances, and I tithed every penny I ever made in high school and college. I truly believe that obedience is why when I walked across the stage at graduation, I owed no money for college, even though I had taken out loans during college. He paved the way and paid the way. Ask me later if you want specifics on that miracle. Me, the child of a carpenter and a teacher's assistant, and the first of my very large family, I have 40 first cousins to attend college, and I could tell you how God guided every single step. How he's guided my 30-year career from a classroom teacher in a tiny rural school division in Virginia to now a principal in Virginia's largest school division. But the story I want to end with is the amazing faithfulness by which God has gifted me with my husband, Russ. So I tried all the online dating apps, and then I stopped, and then I tried them again. And in fact, I did meet Russ through one of them. But on our first date, we both thought, yeah, nice person, but not for me. We stayed friends, and at the time I was living in Stafford, and so we would get our 2 singles groups together because he was going to a church called Burke Community. And I was at a very large church in Stafford, and we would do activities together at times. But our contact was sporadic over the next 10 months. And then he found it necessary to move to Stafford, so even though I had moved to Gainesville at the time, I offered to introduce him to some people. And I went to church with him a couple times there. I'd run and go to church in Gainesville, then I'd drive to Stafford and meet up and take him to church. And meanwhile, I was giving that dating app one more try. And I remember thinking, you know what? If God can create the entire world and all its foundations in just 7 days, surely he can let me meet my husband in 7 days. So I prayed a bold prayer like you read about in 1 John 5. And I said, God, I'm going to give that dating app thing 7 days. And if there's a man out there that you want me to pursue, you let him surface now. I'm nearly 50 and I want to do what you would have me do in my relationships. So please, above all, protect my heart. And if he does not surface, I'm off all the apps permanently. So some of you are like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I'd ever challenge God. Maybe I was just really reading that bold thing differently, but I did. And you know, I had not had one man message me in 2 months. And if any of you have ever done that, like you get these little messages from these guys. And that week, 4 different men messaged me. In a week, in the 7 days. None of those guys worked out. And then I heard that tender calling of God again, and he said, stop looking online and start looking around. I've already answered this prayer for you. And I thought, oh, maybe I should date this guy. It's a very hilarious story about him saying I made the first move, which includes me touching him while he's praying at church. I don't know what he thinks I'm doing at church. Yeah, women get that. He's like, you just don't touch random men. I'm like, you weren't random. And me thinking, why is he holding my hand at my daughter's house watching a movie? And we laugh saying God was up there like, these two are never going to get it. I'm going to have to do this for them. But, so Russ and I did get married last May. He is an amazing man of God, and he's very strong in his convictions, yes. Thank you for that. And he is deeply committed to walking out God's purpose in his individual life as well as being a spiritual leader of our relationship. And now, being vulnerable, we've been asked to be vulnerable, a vulnerable confession. You can see I hand wrote and added it later. We were a dating COVID couple. That's when we really dated. And we spent an abnormally large amount of time together and with very limited distractions. And now we're a working couple. And I commute from Stafford to Fairfax. And that's hard because we're having to learn how to communicate and grow as a married couple. And he just doesn't understand. He was not married to a working person before. And I told him, I am really close to the end. I am not stopping now. And, he's like, what do you mean you have to go back to school? What do you mean they're doing activities? I'm like, I don't know what you think a principal does, but it's not just yell at kids for running in the hall, though I do that regularly. So bumps are inevitable, but I now have a husband who will always meet me at the foot of the cross. So when we run into those bumps, that's where we're going to meet. So as I begin to transition into retirement in the next couple of years, I'm excited to see what he has in mind for me, for steps for both me and for us as a married couple, because our pastor that we went to before always talked about being a power couple for Christ. And the second tender calling that I mentioned that I heard as a teenager, it was that I was going to be married to a pastor. And let's just see what God's saying to us, because he's not a pastor yet. And I just wanted to end by telling you all, this has been an amazing opportunity. And there may be women among us who just needed to hear somebody's voice this weekend to speak into their lives. And as our sweet sister in Christ was so excited to win that door prize, screaming and yelling, that's what happens every time somebody makes that decision to believe in Jesus and Christ with the angels. We get fanatical and excited about a sports event, but we hide back and we're reticent to let people know how much we honor God or how much we thank him. And so it's a challenge I'm having to walk out myself, because it is hard being in public education and standing up for what we know. And I think we have an amazing pastor in Marty to empower us week after week, but we have to dig into the word and let the Holy Spirit speak as well. So thank you all, and I'm just going to continue to pray that we can all walk out these challenges that Lauren has given us this week. Thank you.